welcome to our final panel discussion of the day on the main stage. I would like to introduce 4 extremely distinguished experts in the field of biogerontology, as it is called, otherwise known as Juvenescence. Today, it's my great honor to introduce Greg Bailey. Greg is the CEO of Juvenescence, which, as he will have the opportunity to explain, is a drug developer, which came about with some help, I believe it's correct to say, from Jim Mellon.
Oh, partner.
We have Mike West, who is the CEO of AgeX Therapeutics. And by the way, I think it's worth noting that AgeX is a quoted company, quoted on NASDAQ, if I'm not mistaken.
NYSE.
NYSE. And it's worth taking a look at their share price. So there are very few companies in this sector which are investable as of today. AgeX is one of them. Next, we have Polina Mamoshina of Insilico Medicine. Polina is an expert in artificial intelligence and machine learning, and she'll have an opportunity to tell us something about the role of AI in drug development. And last but not least, we have the world-famous scientist, Dr. Aubrey de Grey, who is a leading expert on gerontology. Some of his YouTube videos have been downloaded or viewed by more than 1 million people. And I think it's fair to say that it was Aubrey who got Jim Mellon originally quite enthused about the entire sector. So, gentlemen, lady, thank you very much for coming. We met, as it happens, back in November, 1st of November, I believe, of last year, when Master Investor organized an event at the Wellcome Collection, the Wellcome Institute. And for my own part, this was my introduction into the new world of biogerontology. And I think we had 8 to 10 world-class speakers, academics and practitioners, who were able to give an overview of recent developments and recent research in this sector. And as a non-scientist, as a non-medical man myself, I came away with the firm impression that there is, in fact, a cluster of technologies currently under development, all of which have potential, but when combined, can go some way to solving the problem of aging or even reversing the natural tendency of our bodies to senesce, as I think is the term that Mike used at the conference. Now, I have to say that, I don't know if this is typical of a British audience, there is a degree of skepticism in this very room, insofar as there are people, would you believe, who don't believe this is actually a live, real, scientific, commercial activity. And of course, there have been, over many years, charlatans in this space selling hope through creams or whatever it might be. So what I'm going to do to kick off, I would just like to ask each of my guests to give me a 1-minute elevator pitch just to explain what this new field of juvenescence is and why we should be taking it very seriously. Then we'll come back to the investment angle. So starting off with you, Greg.
Yeah, so I'm CEO of a company called Juvenescence, and our mandate is to develop drugs to address modifying aging. And you know, when you first became aware of it, for me, it was about 5 or 6 years ago. And you know, then I just thought it was interesting. And I often ask people when I'm presenting, what I'd like you to be able to answer at the end of the presentation is, will we have drugs in the next 5 to 7 years that will be able to modify aging? And if so, how big a market is it going to be? And people have a variety of opinions going into the discussion. There's 2 products, 1 drug, 1 supplement today. The drug is called metformin, costs 5p. So it's not particularly expensive. It's a drug for type 2 diabetes, been around since 1957, incredibly safe. And in a 180,000 patient study, subsequently repeated with 15,000 patients, it added 10% additional healthy years. It's currently in a study at Einstein University to find out because it diminished disease or actually affects the aging pathways, which we now know. And when we know the pathways, scientists will be able to modify them. This is going to happen so much faster than you think, as Jim Mellon pointed out earlier, and my 3 colleagues are going to allude to as well. So that's available today and adds 10%. It was not fit for purpose. It was invented for something else. We will tweak that drug in the next few years to literally be able to add significant healthy years to you. And this is going to happen now. From investing, incredibly important. How's it going to affect defined benefits plans? How is it going to affect so many different industries that are going to be affected by this? So you need to be thoughtful about that. And your own families. You know, if we have this product that was going to do this to help you live longer, how would you change your life if you now know that you're going to live to 110 and be healthy? So my big takeaway to this point is that it is incredibly relevant to you as investors. It's incredibly relevant to you as human beings if we are able to do this and change the lives of 8 billion people on this planet.
Okay, Greg, Mike?
Yeah, so is my microphone working? Okay.
Yep.
So I'm very happy to hear that there's a skeptical audience, because what's going to happen in the next few years, maybe as soon as the next 3 years, is there's going to be a significant number of scientific discoveries that are discussed widely in the media about the biology of aging. And almost certainly that's going to bring an entire industry that's already there, but it's going to expand in what we call snake oil or quack medicine. So a skeptical audience, especially investor audience, is a very good idea. But let me just take 2 seconds, since I have an elevator pitch here, to quickly dissuade you of the skepticism that we can understand or intervene in aging. I can do it in just 2 very quick examples, examples that nature provides us itself. Many of you may have heard that there's diseases of premature aging. So there are children that are born, and by the age of 12 or 13, they die of a heart attack, coronary disease. They have gray hair, wrinkled skin, liver spots on their skin, osteoporosis, cataracts, multiple manifestations of aging because of 1 letter changed in their DNA. That means that there's clockwork mechanisms behind aging. And with modern medical technologies, we can begin to understand those mechanisms and intervene in aging just in the same way that medicine, once they understood the basis of AIDS and the HIV infection, were able to intelligently design new therapeutics to intervene in it. So there's real science, but there's going to be a lot of nonsense at the same time. And so a thoughtful, educated investment community is exactly what we need right now.
Thanks, Mike. Polina?
So I totally agree with Greg and Mike regarding that there have been a lot of advances lately, but the aging field is not new. So those products like snake oil and other creams, they exist for a long time. What is really happening right now that we have a revolution in biomarkers of aging. So right now we have tools that are still developing that can track effectiveness of anti-aging treatments. So we can track aging process right now. And this is really important because we can evaluate the efficacy of those anti-aging therapies right now. We can do this in the clinical setting, so we can go for clinical trials in a way that pharmaceutical companies are doing their drug trials. We can do drug trials for anti-aging products. And this what brings us credibility, and this probably going to remove the skepticism around the aging field and bring viable products on the market.
Thank you, Polina. Aubrey?
Yeah, I mean, the contrast between the historical nature of the anti-aging industry and the emerging nature is very stark. Of course, you're quite right, Victor, to highlight that the anti-aging industry has historically been the epitome of snake oil, the epitome of an industry built on things that don't work. But it's still awfully large. There is a vast amount of money being spent by people on stuff that doesn't work. And that, I think, underpins why meetings like this and visionary investors like Jim and Greg can see where this is going. They can see that once these products do work, once we have stuff that actually effectively keeps people healthy late in life, the magnitude of that industry is going to dwarf anything we've ever known. It's going to dwarf the dot-com boom. So, of course, it makes rational investment sense to get in really early and to take a lot of shots on goal, as Jim likes to put it. I think that's what we're seeing now. When I was starting out and when there wasn't an industry yet, and I was out there on stage and on camera, it was very important, very useful for me that I look so unmaterialistic. No one's going to think that I'm in this for personal financial gain. But now that it is possible to invest and to get somewhere in this, and as you mentioned, now that there are a couple of companies that are actually publicly listed, and there's going to be a lot more in the next year or two, now it's something where a sensible investor has to look beyond the psychology of skepticism. So the skepticism that we've had historically has not only been built up for irrational reasons, but also for profound psychological reasons. The fact is, aging is really horrible, and we have to find ways to put it out of our minds, and pretending that it's some kind of inherently inevitable thing that medicine will never be able to deal with, and therefore that tomorrow's medicine certainly won't be able to deal with, that's been a kind of trick that we've played on ourselves. But if you want to actually be at the forefront of this emerging sector, then you have to put that kind of psychological crutch out of your mind and be truly objective about what we have today.
Thank you, Aubrey. So just to reformulate this very slightly, and please correct me if I haven't got this absolutely correct. Greg, what you're doing is to develop medications, a drug, which can be taken orally. Is it injected, potentially? How is it administered?
We run the gambit from conventional small molecule drugs like metformin that cost 5p, and so they do not need to be expensive. So a lot of the questions I know Aubrey's fielded over the years is, this only going to be for the 1%, the wealthy. If it's 5p and you can sell it for 50p or $1, just get a slightly smaller cup of Starbucks, and buy something that will allow you to live a little longer. So it's not going to be priced. There is going to be biologics that play a role as well. Biologics have to be created and grown. They are going to be more expensive. But I think that the small molecules are going to play a big role. The other fascinating thing as we got involved in this with Jim, Declan, and I was the element that our patient population is 8 billion people, that if you can make something for 5p, you don't have to charge a lot of money. And if it's incredibly safe, I don't need to go through complicated trials. I just have to prove that it's incredibly safe. So these therapeutics will be everything from stem cells, we're very passionate about what Mike's doing, to small molecules, which are being expensive. One last point, it'll hopefully segue into what Mike's going to talk about, is there's a thing called a senolytic, and it naturally it is used to destroy zombie cells that have outlived their usefulness that a number of people on this panel have worked on. And they cause osteoarthritis. What percentage of those are in your knee? Is it when you have osteoarthritis? Is it 10% or is it 30%? And if it's 30% and we destroy that, you're not walking out of the doctor's office. But if you add stem cells to that and regenerate the tissue, not with 70-year-old cells, but one-day-old cells, now you have a comprehensive solution. So this is going to be an incredible opportunity to create an ecosystem and use these opportunities and technologies. I went over a minute.
This is the crossover between what you're doing, Greg, and what you're doing, Mike. Because in terms of the gene therapy, how do you actually go about changing my genome? What happens?
Well, we're actually more in the cell therapy space, but so there's, in our lifetime, we've seen several revolutions in biotech. There was, before we were born, there were drugs. antibiotics came on, in World War II. But then came the world of biologics. So the Genentechs and Amgens of the world, that was the recombinant DNA technologies to make proteins on an industrial scale. Something, was very, very challenging to do before recombinant DNA. But now we're in this realm of biologics where we've got, with these pluripotent cells, this is a field I've been working in for the last, 20 years now, is we've isolated pluripotent stem cells that don't age, unlike you and I, and all the cells we make from them are born young. And we can make them on an industrial scale, and we can make any of the cells of the human body using this. It's an entirely new platform. So, the idea is to put young heart muscle cells into an old patient's heart and give them back the muscle strength in their heart that they had when they were born.
Where are you?
You mentioned gene therapy. And then, so there's introducing cells into the body, which in the history of medicine, we've never been able to do this for an aging population before. But gene therapy kind of was out of favor, in favor, out of favor, is really now in favor again. And that's the idea of going in and actually doing sort of surgery on your DNA. Adding genes or replacing genes or changing the functions of genes in the cells in our body. So with this tool chest, as Aubrey talks about, when you have a broken car, a mechanic takes multiple tools under the car to fix it. It's not just a screwdriver that fixes everything. With this toolbox of new powerful technologies, cell therapy, gene therapy, as you mentioned, and other biologics, we believe we're going to be able to surprise everybody. I think, can I just say this?
Yep.
From an investment standpoint, I'm not in the world of finance. I'm an entrepreneur and I'm a scientist and a business guy. But forgive me for giving advice to investors because I'm not an expert in investment. But in my mind, when you have a demographic shift as powerful as a tsunami of aging, it's the biggest demographic trend of our time, right? For sure. And the spending power of the aged population, they have the majority of the financial assets. And if you have a technological surprise, you mentioned that the investment public isn't expecting this. I think there's the investment opportunity of a lifetime. But forgive me for pontificating on investment.
Just let me ask you, how far away are we from this kind of practical gene technology where you can go in and you can modify someone's genome?
I'm monopolizing the time, so one of you guys want to speak on that?
Yeah, so let me talk about some technology that we're developing right now, which I think may end up answering that question. So at the moment, of course, we are 20 or 30 years into the aspiration of being able to modify the genome of somebody who's already alive, somatic gene therapy as it's called, and we are really not very far along. It's been 20 years since there was a bad accident with one teenager dying in a clinical trial that set gene therapy back a long way. It hasn't really recovered from that very much, and the reason it hasn't recovered is largely because technology hasn't been there to make it recover. But that's changing now. Everyone's heard of CRISPR, this new way of modifying small amounts of DNA in cells. CRISPR started out being unacceptably unsafe. In fact, one of the people who were pioneering it, a guy named George Church, that we all know very well, calls it genomic vandalism. But people have developed second and third generation versions of that, which are getting very, very safe indeed. Now, there are limitations to what they can do, but they can potentially be combined with other approaches to allow much more versatility. One thing that we're doing right now is combining new versions of CRISPR with a technology from bacteria that allows the insertion of large amounts of DNA, many genes at a time, for example. And this is the kind of thing we're going to need. In the next, I would say, 5 years, we may be at the point of being able to do clinical trials of gene therapy modalities that are vastly more powerful than anything that we've seen today. And that, of course, has an application as a platform technology to be used for many, many different types of therapy.
Aubrey, CRISPR, just so we're totally clear about this, this is well beyond the conceptual stage. It's actually in practice right now. It is available medical technology.
Public company is.
It is a public company. So this is a proven medical technology.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, proven, of course, at certain levels. So in general, CRISPR can be used on cells outside of the body that you may then inject into the body as cells. That's a lot easier to make safe than injecting some kind of vector into the body that will modify cells that are already there. But for many applications, especially in aging, you don't have the choice of doing the former because the cells that you want to modify are long-lived, non-dividing cells that can't just be killed and replaced. So it's very important to get this working.
Yeah, Aubrey, I know you've done a lot of work and a lot of thinking about where this is going to take us and how long it's going to take in order to increase human longevity appreciably. But I know this is an impossible question, but I hope you don't mind my asking it. So here we are, 2019, getting on to 2020. Come 2030, 2040, by how much longer will human longevity have been extended?
So one can't actually answer that question because, not only because we have uncertainty about how soon certain technological developments are going to come, but also because when they do come, they're not going to have some kind of smooth, linear impact on longevity. What's going to happen is that we're going to go from this very, very slow increase in longevity that we've seen over the past century or more, of maybe 1 or 2 years per decade in life expectancy, to something where we just can't measure it anymore, because the rate at which we are improving the therapies will be faster than time is passing. Essentially, it all comes down to the fact that these therapies are going to be regenerative. They're going to be ones that don't just slow down aging, they actually take the clock back and take people who are already in middle age or older and turn them back into young adults. So, of course, thereby buying time to improve the therapy so that we can re-rejuvenate the same people later on.
So are there people alive in this audience who will be rejuvenated in this way?
I think there's a very high probability of that. I try and give predictions based on probabilities, and my prediction right now for how soon we have a 50-50 chance of getting to this decisive level of comprehensiveness of these rejuvenation therapies is only 18 years.
18 years.
From now.
And presumably with this regenerative technology, we will be able to live fulfilled lives without any of the degenerative diseases of old age. I mean, what about Alzheimer's? If we live to 120, do we still not have a higher risk of getting Alzheimer's?
The idea is that we won't. The idea is that all of the various types of molecular and cellular damage that accumulate in the brain that come together to form dementia of whatever sort, especially Alzheimer's, all of those things will be repaired. So that the structure and composition of the brain at the molecular level, the cellular level, will remain pretty much how it is in a young adult. And that, of course, the human body is a machine, so its function is determined by its structure.
Mike.
You brought up a very good point, and I think it's worth addressing. The goal of virtually the entire gerontological community, that means the people that are studying the biology of aging, medical researchers, the goal is to increase health span, not necessarily lifespan is the goal. Why do I say that? I mean, we'd all like to live longer. Because there's the common misperception, I think, that the goal of aging researchers is to extend human lifespan, allowing us to live more and more decrepit and disabled. And who wants a life like that? Who would like to live another 20, 30 years with all kinds of tubes and devices and artificial technologies? Well, the good news, I guess, is that I don't know of anybody in the field of aging research who has that as the goal. The goal is to extend health span, the number of years we're free of disabling diseases, like macular degeneration that robs you of your central vision. It's really disabling. Or, of course, heart failure, and all these age-related chronic degenerative diseases, where the goal is to push those off to allow people to be productive, happy, free of disease as long as possible.
Greg, you wanted to comment.
Yeah, it's very interesting that of the top 10 leading causes of death, they're all age-related. Dementia, diabetes, respiratory disease, cancer. Your chance of getting any one of those pathologies at 30 and at 50, or at 70, it's 50 times higher, 20 to 50 times higher for each one of those pathologies. Something has happened in those 40 years that has predisposed you to Alzheimer's, to degenerative tissue. So if people like the scientists beside me are able to find the products that will slow or halt aging, all of those diseases are pushed out. So the economic cost of that as well to governments, to social medicine, is pushed out. So on the concern of Alzheimer's disease or degenerative tissues, all of those are affected by the ability. And as Aubrey just pointed out, should we be able to begin to address the cellular pathways so well that we reverse aging and that you have the anatomy and physiology of 25-year-olds, there ceases to be an issue. The time frame, much like Jim was commenting, it's impossible to figure out when the next recession is. It's impossible to tell you definitively when that'll happen. But it won't be a gradual upslope. It'll be a sudden jump, as Aubrey again alluded to. And Mike mentioned as well with recombinant DNA. So, and when it happens, it's happening very suddenly. And you need to be aware. And I think it's possible in the next few years, again, to make it relevant to investors and to your own lifespans.
I just want to ask Polina at this point, where does AI come into this?
So it's exactly in the right place, because first we can develop drugs using AI, and we can do this faster comparing to the current standard process. At the same time, what we can also do, we can develop biomarkers, and that's really important. We're all talking about the health span, but how we can measure health span, for how we can predict the progression of diseases, or even predict whether the person is going to develop disease or not. This is really important. This is where AI coming, and right now, revolution in AI happening in many areas, including healthcare. In 2017, FDA firstly approved for the first time the AI-based system to diagnostic of the heart disorders, which is a huge step for FDA. They're a really conservative regulatory agency. They did it as a fast-track approval, meaning they recognize the potential. Most of the pharmaceutical companies that are top pharmaceutical companies right now, they either have a project inside focused on AI, or partner with a company that focused on AI. And they do both drug discovery and biomarker development. So there is a lot of potential right now. What is also interesting, the field is moving so fast, it's even hard to predict what is going to happen probably in 2 years. Because most of the advances that have been achieved in robotics, for example, or autonomous car driving, they are translatable or really easy translatable into healthcare, which is fascinating because we have right now all those wearable devices tracking us all the time. It's a lot of information. This is like really big data. You've been streaming information about your health status, about your heart status, like every second. You have to have a really sophisticated tools to analyze it. Otherwise, it's impossible. You're not able to do this with your human brain. If you're even a genius, you're like a genius doctor, I don't know, with a lot of degrees, it's impossible to do this. You only have to have AI tools that will track this.
I'm looking forward to that, where I can download all my health metrics to my smartphone. Time is running short, but I just want to ask Greg, keeping it very, very simple here.
No pun intended.
So this drug is going to be commercialized, within 2 years?
As I said, there's a number of them that can almost go the route of medical foods because they're so safe. At our corporation, we're hoping to launch our first product by this time next year, which causes your heart to function better. In mice, it also protected their brains and allowed them to live longer, which is a much more difficult study.
This time next year, let's suppose the drug comes to market. When I take this drug, what happens to me? Are there visible results within a short space of time?
Interestingly, and going back to what Polina said about biomarkers and diagnostics, for people to continue to use a product, they're going to want to know that it actually is doing something. This one in particular, you'll be able to test your urine, and you'll be able to know that it is in fact working. And then the interesting thing, it increases something called left ventricular ejection fraction, which basically means your heart is functioning better. So there will be significant results for anyone over the age of 50 who's concerned about their heart.
And when should we expect Juvenescence to list or to come to market?
Market's willing, and depending on that recession that people have been talking about today. I think that we're in a very interesting opportunity that this is such a huge thematic. And so to be able to raise 200, 300 million, 500 million is going to be very important to accelerate this for the next few years. So market's willing, hopefully next year.
And Polina, Insilico is also thinking about a listing.
Yeah, we're planning to be listed in 2-3 years.
2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
And where is that likely to be?
Hong Kong, so we moved our headquarters to Hong Kong because we also want to expand in China. Initially, we're a US company.
So you see the real growth potential is in China?
Yes, because of the data, because of the mindset of people there. They're really thinking about this digital health. They are really open to AI, so there's a lot of potential there in China.
And the sheer size of the population.
Yes, also that.
Okay.
But also the burden of the aging population. So they recognize the potential even on the governmental level because they have this huge burden of an aging population.
Right, that's a very important point. And Mike, impossible question to answer in 15 seconds. Where is AgeX going next? What is the big next event to look out for at AgeX?
Well, we're already public, so I'm going to be careful what I say, but in terms of forward-looking statements, I'll just expand a bit about something I mentioned earlier. And Polina mentioned, the pace of scientific discovery right now is breathtaking. In part, it's due to information technology. In part, it's due to high-throughput sequencing of nucleotides like DNA and RNA. So what's going to happen in the next 3 years is you'll be reading about, not only from our company, but from other companies, really significant advancements in understanding and potentially intervening in aging. AgeX wants to be on the top of that wave. We picked our ticker on purpose, AGE. We want to be the #1 biotech company in the field of aging biotechnology. And so where we plan to be is showing that we have the leading intellectual property and product development stream that will most powerfully intervene in the biology of aging for the benefit of for all of us.
Okay, so hopefully we'll meet you again next year.
Forward to it.
Well, gentlemen, Polina, thank you so much for that. I'm so sorry time is short. We spent a day in November which went by very rapidly, as I recall. Half an hour is really nothing. But thank you so much for your insights and for your presentation of the current situation. Thank you.
Thank you.